Welcome back to the FanSpeak Network and another episode of Sibling Showdown, the best ball edition. That's right, we were fully in best ball season. And today we are talking about the BBM payout structure and how we are going to handle things a little differently this summer. All right, that's right. BBM5 just launched yesterday. We are taping on Tuesday, and we were super excited that obviously best ball season is back. BBM5 is here. But with that, Steve and I want to talk about the payout structure of BBM. But first, let me bring in my sibling, my brother, Steve. Steve, I know we taped our first live draft. If you missed that, go check it out on the FanSpeak Network. Of course, we also be sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate that because we're going to be having tons of great best ball content. But Steve, my brother, my friend, how are you doing in the BBM streets so far? And yeah, I know you're excited, but how are you doing?
Doing good so far. I've done a couple fast drafts, already have a couple slows going. Just trying to do some of each. Obviously, we'll do more and more aggressive once the schedules come out. But yeah, like excited to get going and get some of this value that's out there with some of these inefficient ADPs.
Yeah, you make a good point. We've kind of touched on it yesterday, but there are, positives and negatives to drafting each month, and that's why you should draft each month. I kind of want to spend this week block out how many, I am going to allot to, well, tomorrow starts May, but May, June, July, August, and then the beginning of September. So I kind of want to map that out and look through where my strengths have been in the past. I've actually done best. I don't know if you feel like you have a sweet spot month, but I actually do best with that middle part of the summer where I'm still getting enough value, but still have a little more information. So while a lot of people avoid July, I kind of like July. What's your favorite month?
Honestly, I think last year I definitely did best late August.
Okay. You really took advantage of that news and reacting. Yeah. I did not take advantage of reacting to the news as well. So I'm going to try to do better about that this year. And speaking of, I'll be having a strategy article series this week of things I like that I did last year, want to continue, things that I didn't like that I did last year, want to do less of. So look for that. Steve will be starting his rookie landing spot series. So look for that all on fanspeak.com, of course. So again, be sure to like and subscribe. Also keep in mind, if you're getting started with Underdog, use code FANSPEAK for 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That gives you 4 free BBM drafts. So that doesn't suck. So keep that in mind. And yeah, be sure to our best ball articles will essentially start in a day or two, and they will keep going all summer long. Same with the shows here. So again, be sure to like and subscribe. Steve, I'm going to pull over off of Twitter, the BBM payout structure. And again, what we love is, yes, we lost the regular season prizes, but I think Underdog will definitely be doing probably some regular season contests. So we lost the regular season aspect to the Underdog drafts, the BBM draft, but it has a much, much, much flatter payout structure. As you can see, the top prize is 1.5 million, and 10th place gets 10% of that, and top 20 gets 6 figures, top 100 gets 5 figures. And even if you all the way down to the min cash, you're getting more than you got last year. Last year, you got your money back. This year, you're getting $10 more. So all those, to me, I love that it's a flatter payout structure. I believe when you get through quarterfinals to semifinals last year was 1 of 16. So obviously it's 1 of 12 to get out of the pod. Last year was 1 of 16 to get out of quarterfinals to semis. This year it's 1 of 13. That's much better. So quarterfinals are better advance rate. Semifinals, if you finish, last year, you didn't really get rewarded for even making semifinals, essentially. If you finished high in the semifinals, second, third, fourth place, but didn't move on, you didn't really get paid out for that. And this year you do. So those are the biggest differences to me in looking at this payout structure chart. And I mentioned the advance rates of quarterfinals being better. What's your favorite part and kind of what sticks out to you the most?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's, kind of what you said. One, the fact, it's still the same 2 of 12 to get out of your pod.
Mm-hmm.
and you're getting your 35, so it's a little better. So you're guaranteed that. And yeah, quarterfinals, you're potentially can get a little bit more if you don't advance out, but uh, that's not where it is. But once you get to semifinals, you really have opportunities to make more money, and that is big because you should be rewarded for getting that far. And you just look at it, and 2156 essentially make 10 times their entry fee. That's pretty big. I mean, you
Yeah.
had to go, you that was not a number that you got last year. You
Right.
know that that over 2,000 people were getting that kind of return. So
And you should be focusing on total ROI, right? Like if you're watching a
exactly,
best ball show in April or May, you're pretty dedicated to your best ball portfolio and probably are investing a lot. So you should care about your total ROI, and this helps that.
yeah, and that's what I'm looking at because when you're it is, and that's why they made such a big deal about everyone. They made the finals slightly bigger, but everyone who makes the finals is guaranteed to, if you max entered, you got all your entry fees
Mhm.
covered. So then any other ones that just made the
Mhm.
playoffs, made
Semis,
advancing
yeah.
semis, are going to profit for you. So that's really big because you know like we talked yesterday, 25% of my lineups from the BBM went to the playoffs. The only reason I broke even and had a very slight profit was because of the regular season prize, because I had three that made the regular season prize pool.
Mhm.
I would not have done it on the BBM actual prizing because I just didn't get anything to the finals. And even if I
Right.
did, I would have needed to had one of them finish one of my 10 lineups that made the playoffs advance high.
Right.
And so it just shows you how tough it is. And that's with only doing 40 BBMs. Obviously, if I had max entered, it would have been even much higher that I would need to finish. So it
Well,
just
yeah.
really goes to show you what you needed to do last year. And this year, it's much easier, much, much easier.
Right. Steve talked about, obviously we did, hundreds of best ball across multiple sites, and hundreds on between the two of us, hundreds on Underdog. But you did 40 BBMs. I did 50 BBMs last year because we knew it was a lotto, right?
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I was going to keep that number this year and just do basically our live streams and maybe an occasional one on off stream. But now I've changed my mind on that because of the strip payout structure. I do want to invest more in this contest. And so, kudos to Underdog. And I think that's awesome. So now let's talk about, Steve, what we're going to do with this information. How are we
Mhm.
going to handle things the same, differently, more aggressively? And we came up with 4 major points that we want to hit. And we're going to keep this short and simple, or short and sweet. So I'll get right to it. Basically the 4 things that we identified as ways to kind of take advantage of this flatter payout structure and have some success with this for the total ROI is: number one, I want to protect fragility at any position. So for all positions, I don't want there to really be anything hyper fragile. That's not to say that if it naturally fell that way, I wouldn't maybe occasionally do it, but I am going to have really balanced positional builds because I don't want any position to be too fragile, to protect against injuries, to protect against inefficiencies in play. Depth chart changes throughout the season, and so I want to protect all those things with a very balanced build. How would you react to that, and how are you going to handle that?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think we look at this 2 ways. One, total number of players at position. Our favorite is, of course, the 3-5-7-3,
Mm-hmm.
but we are very open, as you saw yesterday. We talked yesterday that you can if you take a tight end earlier, that's one where
Yeah.
I'm okay. I did that with one of my drafts today, where I only did 2 tight ends. Quarterback, I'm less okay with, especially now before we know bye weeks, because
Mm-hmm.
conceding a minimum of what you're hoping is 15 points from a quarterback is tough. It's going to be tough to overcome. And of course, you're hoping your quarterbacks are getting you more like 20 points. So, where tight end, could be a minimum of 5 to 8 points, a backup, third tight end. So
Right.
that's where the one position where I'd go thin. But Yeah, I think, and it's the draft allocation where, if you're taking a couple running backs early, you then start moving to another position. You take a couple receivers early, you start moving to another position, etc. So you balance it out. Not really looking to take, as amazing as the idea of getting like, Lamar Jackson and uh, Josh Allen in the first 3 rounds sounds like, no. I want to have maybe one hero quarterback, but not two. I don't need two. I don't need somebody riding the bench that I'm taking that high every week. So, um, those types of builds, yeah, I'm going to avoid in this type of tournament, just because, I do want to get as many shots into the playoffs and keep advancing.
Right. And I'm going to keep reiterating that, like, my main goal, like, if people are going to say, what is your main goal of BBM5? Well, of course, I want to win $1.5 million, but I want to have the highest advance rate possible. And you and I have had good advance rates, or very successful advance rates the last two best ball seasons. But I want to have a very high advance rate, which I hope then leads to a very strong ROI. And again, of course, I want to have him make a finals appearance or two, and hopefully get some shots at the top prize. But with that, I'm going to keep reiterating, I want as high advance rate as possible. And so I want to avoid that fragility at any position. And, it's crazy. You're seeing a lot of people on Twitter, and we're obviously interacting with best ball folks on Twitter, but you're seeing a lot of people post their first few drafts, and it's a lot of 2 quarterback builds. And I'm not saying that's wrong, and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that, and you're going to you heard me say it ad nauseum last summer, and I'm going to say it ad nauseum this summer. It's been 2 years in a row now of 60 to 70 quarterbacks having NFL starts, meaning multiple starts per team for several NFL teams. And that's for injuries, which I know last year felt like an injury Armageddon, but that's for injuries and inefficient play. But it's been 2 years in a row of that. So I think that's stickier than people think. And I don't love that. Believe me, I hate that. I don't want any player to get injured. But unfortunately, it's football, and it happens. And whether it's just a couple weeks or several weeks or the season, it's going to happen. And so I want to protect against that. We can try to, we probably will do other episodes this summer trying to identify why that's happening, or could it improve? But I don't feel confident that it's going to improve enough this year to that, we're only going to see 40 some quarterbacks start. And, you can really count on those 2 guys giving you most of your starts if you're doing a 2 quarterback build. So I'm going to hammer the 3 quarterback build. You'll see that in my article this week. We will do more shows on that. But yeah, first point, we're avoiding fragility at any position. So second point is avoiding fragility in bye weeks. We can't do anything with that yet, but we will be able to do something with that in 2 weeks. In approximately 2 weeks, we'll get the schedule release from the NFL. We'll do a lot of content here on bye weeks, on playoff schedules, of course, because that's a big deal. And quite honestly, I'm probably going to temper how many drafts I do until then, because avoiding the fragility at bye weeks is our number 2 kind of strategy to try to get that highest advance rate possible. So speak to that. I know you have hammered the bye week thing, big time last year. And so I know, again, we're just going to be really, really careful about that. But talk about how you manage that throughout a draft.
Yeah, so it's twofold. I mean, one, it's definitely by position, but it's also total roster. And what we do want to stack up teams, but we typically want to stack up teams and get 2 to 4 guys from a certain team. But if we're doing that from 2 teams that have the same bye, and we do 4, that's 8. That's half, essentially half of our roster. And particularly if they're all typically in the high drafted area, that makes it very tough. And if it's all one position, if it's, say, our top 2 quarterbacks, say last year week 7, the Cowboys, the Bengals had the same bye. If we taken Burrow and Dak, and then you might have you need to have a third quarterback, and obviously, in my opinion, in that situation. But if it's a weak third quarterback, maybe you get lucky and they get a really good week, but you're just putting yourself in a much weaker situation. Like when I take 2 quarterbacks for the same bye week, I want them like the 1 and 3 or the 2 and 3. I don't necessarily want 1 and 2. Same at a position group. Jets had that bye also. I didn't want to take Hall, Pollard, and Mixon, and have my
Mm-hmm.
top three running backs all have that same bye.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mind having two running backs, 2 of 5 or 2 of 6 running backs with the same bye? No, of course not. But I'd like it to be, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 4 or something like that. I don't want to take too much ammunition out of my team each week in a particular week, because each week is going to matter, and sure, can you make up for that week? Hopefully, but if you just have that week where, because you're essentially playing your entire second team, you're playing the
You're
second
right.
half of your draft, and maybe you get lucky with 1 or 2 picks, exceeding expectations, but
But
probably
you're going to have a weaker score, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to have a much weaker score, and you could get really behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're just dominating every other week, you're going to be hurting.
So you're saying you want to watch the balance of the bye weeks, both at the position and in totality on the roster.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. And that's going to come into play here in 2 weeks. And again, stay tuned to this channel, because we will give much consideration to that, and probably have multiple shows and short videos and stuff and content about bye weeks, and who's on what and what are good pairings and all the things. So stay tuned to that in a couple of weeks when the NFL schedule release hits. Okay, number 3 is something that I did a couple times in the big board draft, and I want to kind of do better now. And I've already learned my lesson, I hope, is it's okay to draft players that have injury risk, or are known as injury prone, or maybe more risky to injury, like running quarterbacks and that kind of thing. Guys that are coming back from injury, like a Nick Chubb, it's okay to draft. I'm going to draft those guys. Let me be clear, because you can get, especially now, some really good value on those guys. What I'm not going to do anymore, because I think I did it in a few best big board drafts, what I'm not going to do anymore, I'm going to be very mindful of, is I'm not going to draft an all injury team, essentially. And yeah, it could play out great. You could run great on that. And, everybody comes back at faster and quicker than people expect, or at a higher level than people expect coming off injury. The injury prone guys may not get injured, all the things. But, I know people, joke about or talk about, like, always play it like you're right and that kind of stuff. I think one of my best ball strengths is my cynical nature. Actually, I actually think, and so that's what I'm going to do. Is, am I drafting all these potential injury prone potential guys that we know are coming off injury, like a Nick Chubb? Yes, I am, but I'm not going to overload any one team, as I'm drafting, with too many of those type of players, because that just will carry too much risk, in my opinion. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I tend to agree. And again, I think it's even more so if it is loaded at a certain position, most likely running back.
Yeah.
But it can make it get very thin very fast. You have a couple guys who, you're taking Nick Chubb, Jonathan Brooks, the rookie out of Texas, and these guys who might not even be starting week 1 and week 2. And sure, maybe they're all back by week 6, week 7. But those first 5-6 weeks, you could be hurting, and you could be just so far behind you can't catch up.
Again, getting behind the 8 ball, like you said.
They might be the absolute right backs you need in the playoffs. Look at Brees Hall last year.
Yep.
Absolutely tremendous.
Perfect
in the playoffs.
Example. Yep.
But he had 1 or 2 weeks early in the season. But outside of that, and somewhat because the Jets were just awful, but the Jets were also not going to give him 20 carries a game because they wanted to build him up. And, but late in the year, they had no problem, giving him that kind of workload.
Yep.
And he was tremendous. But, you had to get to that point. And so if you took a bunch of other backs similar to that, you were probably going to be hurting, because you probably weren't going to have enough points to get a Brees Hall team to the playoffs.
Yeah, say you took like a Brees Hall, Javonte Williams, Nick Chubb. I'm not saying Nick Chubb's injury prone, but another guy that's injury prone that got injured. I can't remember at the top of my head. And I mean, you're just, it doesn't matter that Brees Hall had an amazing week 17, because you need that right combination. I feel the same way with quarterbacks. If I draft Anthony Richardson or Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts, even at the top of drafts, I don't know if the tush push is going to be as alive and as popular was last year without Jason Kelce, but I assume it will be, even though they have Barkley and no Kelce. I still think there's going to be the tush push. I still think he's going to run. So say I have some of those rushing quarterbacks. I'm not going to combine them all together. I'm going to, have a more pocket passer, likely like a Justin Herbert or a Trevor Lawrence or something. And again, I get it. I know that any quarterback can get injured. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, who just are, pocket passers and, play number 4 for Rodgers and, October for Cousins, pops their Achilles, it's over. So listen, I get it. You don't have to say that I'm not saying only running quarterbacks get injured. I'm just saying they present more of a risk, and I am not going to draft all of them together on this. Am I going to draft them? Yes, just not all together on the same team. So that's just another example.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it's just something to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah.
Balance in that department.
Absolutely. Okay. So that covered our third point, and our fourth and final point that we really want to consider, that we hope improves our advance rate and thus will improve our ROI, is to really pay attention to the whole entire playoff weeks 15, 16, 17. You'll hear week 17 is all that matters. Yes, that is where the big money still exists. But as you can see, and as we showed on the graphic earlier in this show, if you make the playoffs, you get more than last year. You profit $10 on that particular contest. If you make it to the semifinals, you're making more. If you place high in the semifinals but don't make it to the finals, you're making more than you did last year. And of course, if you make it to the finals, you are making more than you did last year, even if things don't break your way week 17. So I'm not saying, of course, I want to make as many finals appearances and have things optimized for week 17. And of course, I'm still going to consider that. But I'm also going to give, and I did last year, I gave consideration to the entire playoff schedule as a whole. And you'll see that in my article of what I did right and what I want to do more of this year. But I'm going to take it to another level this year. When that schedule release comes out in a couple weeks, I'm going to really analyze weeks 15 and 16, basically just as much as I do week 17, because that's how you A, get to week 17 in the finals, and B, it's going to help the full ROI. And so I want those teams that have a nice playoff picture throughout, and but that goes for matchups, conditions of potential weather, dome versus, cold weather games, all those kind of things, potential, like what the likely total would be set out. We can't predict, that many months out and not knowing what the injuries are. But, those are the factors that I will consider in kind of what teams I really want to target the most in regards to the entire playoff schedule. What are your thoughts on looking at the playoff schedule as a whole?
Yeah, no, and it's, to me, it was always a whole you got to walk before you can run mentality with focusing too much on week 17, because if you don't get that team to week 17, what does it matter? So you need to have a great week 16. You need to have a good week 15, especially with the whole 1 of 13. Well, last year 1 of 16, 1 of 16.
But this year 1 of 13, 1 of 16.
But now 1 of 13, 1 of 16. So yeah, you still really need that. And of course, being 1 of 13 definitely helps for quarterfinals. But we need to make sure that we are having really strong matchups and schedules those weeks as well, because we saw a lot of top end players and teams just get absolutely wiped out that week. Those weeks, the guys
Cowboys,
Cowboys, the Dolphins. I mean, Tyreek Hill teams just were not represented.
In the finals, right?
In the finals, he absolutely dominated his way through the regular season.
Right, exactly. And that's a perfect point for both the Cowboys and Dolphins, who played each other in week 16, and both teams puttered in that week. I believe Mostert had 1 touchdown. Mostert was very well represented in the finals last year, but not many of the other Dolphins and Cowboys outside of CeeDee Lamb really were, because of those week 15 and 16 performances. Same with the Bills. It was James Cook in week 15. And, while Josh Allen was fine, it wasn't any of his other weapons like we kind of thought or hoped. So, these are just considerations and things to consider now, especially mid-May, once we have this data and information. So those are our 4 points. I'll summarize again. Number 1, no fragility at any position, making sure all 4 position groups are, pretty well balanced. Number 2, no fragility in bye weeks once we have that information in a couple weeks. And that goes for, as you said, the position in each position and the team as a whole for each team you draft. Number 3, we're going to draft guys that are injury prone and are coming off injury. We're not going to draft them all on the same team. And number 4, focus on the playoff schedule in its entirety, all 3 playoff weeks, not just week 17. So I think that sums it up. Any final thoughts for you, Steve, for this getting ready for a BBM5 mindset?
No. And I think it's really good what Underdog did. Like we said, we both expect there to be something more involving the regular season coming down the pipeline later. Mm-hmm. But I like what they did with this, their flagship tournament for sure.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. This has been fun. Go check the live draft, our first live draft, but it's the first of many. We have a couple new faces we'll be introducing on the channel. We'll have Tyler and Spread, as you know, from the channel doing more drafts. We'll be doing more drafts. We'll be doing more shows like this, strategy stuff, ranking stuff. Stuff will be on Fanspeak. Stuff will be on here. So be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for joining us. For Steve, I'm Meg, and we will see you next time.